I'm Scott Dibbles with the Investing News Network, and today I'm having a chat with Remi Piet of America's Market Intelligence. Thank you for joining me, Remi.
My pleasure, Scott.
So, there's some big news coming out of Colombia from the past few days. There appears to have been a split in the Colombian rebel group FARC, with some leaders in the group declaring the government wasn't keeping up its end of a peace deal signed between the group and the Colombian government only 3 years ago. The leaders announced that they would be picking up arms again. So, Remy, what can you tell me about what's happened? What has led to this?
Well, it's been something that's been in the making for several months today, and obviously the big news that you have Ivan Marquez and Jesus Santrich, that were two leaders of the FARC prior to the negotiation of the agreements between the Santos administration and the FARC here. They decided last week to officially call for the other leaders and the entire FARC to go back, take up arms, and go back into clandestinity. So that's decision. That's a big airline that happened last week. But obviously, this has some roots for several weeks and months, and can be actually studied from the prism of politics and what the Ivan Duque administration has done in regards to the agreement signed by the Santos administration. Also, geopolitical dimension with the relation between Venezuela and Colombia. And what might be more interesting for our listeners is the impact that it would have in terms of the soundness and security of investment, whether in the mining sector, but also infrastructure and energy. Happy to comment on this.
Sure. Well, tell me a little bit about what's happened between the government and the rebel groups. We'll get on to Venezuela after that.
Yeah, sure. So what you have is you had an agreement signed 3 years ago between the Santos administration and the FARC leaders, of which Ivan Marquez and Jesus Santrich. And this agreement was actually never backed neither by the Ivan Duque administration, who actually came to power in August 2018. That was known to be against this negotiation and the agreement with the FARC, that was considered to be too dim and too good on the FARC, with a series of impunity measures and allowing them to just get away with a series of murders and strong acts of terror that they have done for several decades. But also the population themselves, meaning that when that agreement was signed by Santos and the FARC and was submitted for referendum, the Colombian population actually did not back that agreement. So you have a very split Colombian population and Colombian political system over this agreement between the FARC and Colombia. As a result, even if you have the institutions that were in place to try to help FARC commanders and FARC dissidents to actually go back into formal life and get into let's say formal economic activity and go back into society, this actually was not really strongly backed by the new administration of Ivan Duque, and that gave a pretext for two of the former FARC leaders, Ivan Marquez and Jesus Santrich, to decide to call for a renewal of the conflict. I mean, there's a series of issues there. Both Ivan Marquez and Jesus Santrich are heavily tied with drug cartels and cocaine production in Colombia. They have ideological ties with the Maduro regime and the leftist movements, and they have everything to gain from just calling for a resurgence of the conflict between the FARC and the Colombian government, both from the political level and economic level, and secure of their own claims as leaders of a rebellion against an established state.
Okay, and so speaking of Venezuela, so FARC has previously been accused of being supported by the Venezuelan government. And of course, the current Colombian president, Ivan Duque, has made a fresh accusation that Nicolas Maduro, president of Venezuela, is supporting FARC by providing safe haven for the rebels. And according to recent reports, the Colombian government has already conducted a raid, and there have been 12 people killed that the government identified as members of FARC. So what can you tell me about why is Venezuela involved in a Colombian rebel group?
Well, when you actually look at the activity of the FARC, I mean, they've been much more active and present in the southwest of Colombia and the frontier with Ecuador, especially the province of Nariño. That's also where you have, strong cocaine production. However, there's been historical ties with Venezuela and political and logistic supports from Venezuela to help the FARC guerrillas be active and operate in a series of places in Colombia. And the frontier between Venezuela and Colombia is quite porous. You can tell for a series of clues that those ties have intensified between the FARC and Venezuela. When Ivan Marquez and Jesus Santrich actually called for the FARC to go back and take up arms, it was done through internet with a network that is hosted in Venezuela. You have today you're seeing another resurgence of conflict and support to subnational actors, in that case the FARC guerrilla, that has to be understood in the specific context of a relation between Colombia and Venezuela has been antagonistic for several decades. The Venezuelans are seeing Colombia as the main ally of Washington and the Trump administration in trying to have the Maduro regime tumble, and therefore, to their eyes, it's a retaliation by supporting the FARC and by encouraging the ex-leaders to go back into clandestinity and attack a series of potential governmental or economic interests of Bogota. It's also a way for Maduro to retaliate against what he's perceiving as a Western/Trump effort to undermine his own position.
Okay, and so we're going to need to talk about the resources industry. What does this mean for investors that are operating in Colombia? Has fighting between FARC and the government traditionally been in regions with extractive industry activity? And are there signs that the industry will need to change the way it operates if there's another armed conflict brewing?
Well, that's exactly what is interesting to look at. I mean, the news yesterday, although it has done made a series of different headlines in international press, doesn't really change the game of the game right now in terms of the situation for the extractive industries and other investment in Colombia. First of all, because the situation has never been clearly peaceful in Colombia. You still had existing dissidents in Colombia that call themselves, that use the ideology of the FARC to continue their own operation, especially in search of extortion, in search of possibilities to produce cocaine and then export it to international markets. So you already had dissident groups such as the Bloqueo 36 that actually next to especially Continental Gold operation that were very active and had led to the death, unfortunately, of 3 geologists last year. So this situation was already latent with a series of security risks to investment. What you have to understand when you actually look closely at the situation of operational areas from guerrilla groups, whether the FARC or the ELN, Ejército de Liberación Nacional, is another guerrilla group that has never signed any kind of peace agreement with the Colombian government, is that they have very clear areas where they operate. You can actually have a well-producing and well-developed project in Colombia, in regions of Antioquia, even in the southwest of the country, if you actually have a clear understanding of what are the local security challenges. There are some issues that any team of operating on behalf of an exploration or an explorative company in the mining or in the energy sector should be aware of in terms of what are the networks of influence with local political actors or local economic actors that are whether linked to guerrilla movement or linked to narco traffickers or linked to other groups of interests. All this has to be extremely carefully mapped in Colombia. As I was saying, the traditional region where the FARC have been more active has been the Provincia de Nariño, parts of Antioquia also where they've been present, and that's where you have important projects, especially in the mining sector. But if you have a clear protocol in place and the right intelligence gathering processes and strategy, you'll be able to make a a sound decision as to whether one project is a project that will be in the short run impacted by a resurgence of conflict between guerrillas and the government, or if by implementing the correct security protocol, you'll be able to mitigate any such risks.
Okay, so obviously there's a lot of risk in connections in companies make when they operate in Colombia, but have there been any examples of rebel groups specifically targeting the resources industry, or is it just a risk of being in the wrong place?
Well, the thing is, for groups such as the FARC or other guerrilla groups to prosper, they need to make sure that there's not many presence from the government, that there's no formal companies operated, and they also need to be able to finance their own operation by trying to extort, monies from different economic actors in the vicinity of their territory. So that's why when you mention targeting, we've seen operations against, as I say, Continental Gold when they were trying to operate the Berlin reserves concession. Sorry, we've seen a series of pressure and try to influence or scare away different actors from operating close to some areas of operations of guerrillas. And this is because they just they see the resource companies as a Trojan horse from the Colombian government, and as an institutional actor that would actually bring together with their own operation a series of military actors and security forces that will be detrimental to the development of their own activity. So what they want is to remain in clandestinity and prevent influence or investment from any exogenous actors that will prevent them from developing their drug trafficking processes or any kind of trafficking. You have a series of human trafficking here also, and gold, and especially mining operations are targeting, because informal gold miners are very good ways for guerrillas or drug traffickers to launder monies and revenues into informal gold mining. So if you have a resurgence of formal actors and industrial mining actor in area where you could have had instead informal miners that will launder your money, that's definitely not in your best interest.
Okay, and what about on a political leader? So from what I'm reading online and from coverage out of Colombia, that there is quite a bit of a split within FARC. So the group's political leader is saying that they would continue to honor the deal with the government. So why have these two leaders and quite a few others decided to go out on their own, or is the political side of the party out on its own?
No, I mean, you had the whole idea was to have a formalization of the FARC into a political party that will run for elections. And they actually even ran for elections, presidential elections, receiving just not a large size of the votes. But that was the idea of formalizing a guerrilla into a political party. Now, this is obviously was not in the best interest of two of its leaders, Ivan Marquez and Jesus Santrich, that were also pursued for drug trafficking, that were risking jail time for their connection with a series of cartels. And so they decided to take up arms and just call for a renewal of the guerrilla. Now, it's interesting instead as to look at this specific split inside the FARC. Where I think is even more interesting is actually to look at the split now existing in the reaction to this decision from Ivan Marquez and Jesus Santrich. You have different political parties in Colombia, some of them being very strongly against the FARC. Others have been, suggesting a support to the Santos administration peace agreement with the guerrilla. And therefore, the positioning of each political actors is very interesting to look at, especially just a couple months away from local elections at the city level, and even more importantly, in the province level. So each candidate for governor right now has been impacting his own campaign and is under scrutiny towards his own position towards this peace agreement that was signed by the Santos administration. Some would claim that this would probably favor political candidate from the Centro Democrático and the Duque administration, and all the political stream of the Uribismo from former President Álvaro Uribe. And they will win a few votes because of the resurgence of this security issue on the political agenda. However, I still believe that in some key mining and energy jurisdictions such as Antioquia, you have political actors such as Anibal in Medellin that will still win the next governor leadership. But if you're an investor, if you're a mining or an energy company investing today in Colombia, you have to be very cautious as to understand the impact that this resurgence of insecurity or political claim from guerrillas will have on the normal traditional political game ahead of very important local elections.
Okay, and just before we wrap up, can you just remind us of when the local elections will be taking place in Colombia?
So it's supposed to be at the last week of October with a potential second round in early November. We'll have new establishments of both at every city levels and every province level, because the specificity of Colombia is that there's no possibilities to renew a mandate to an existing mayor or governor. So each province and each city will have a new leadership. And I strongly advise, any companies in the extractive sectors to be very clear as to understand the positions of the political establishment next to their concessions or next to their investment. Understand both in terms of their political allegiances with Uribe, with other political actors, and understand their background in terms of how they were influenced in the city or in the province, especially in terms of economic activities, areas of networks of allegiances and alliances with key stakeholders, and also personal economic interests with existing investors.
Okay, would it be fair to suggest that people interested in investing in Colombia would wait until after the elections, or do you think that you could get a pretty good idea now?
No, I mean, I would not advise to wait until after the elections. I mean, first of all, because any investment in terms of the extractive industry is a very long-term investment. What I'm saying is that for existing investment or for people to looking at, taking a bigger stake, they should be more cautious in terms of understanding what is the existing political map. But there are clear interests and interesting investment existing today in Colombia, especially in operations in Antioquia. A series of companies operating also despite the potential rise of insecurity in Nariño, and we'd be more than happy to provide any kind of insight onto this. Opportunities exist today with the price of gold, especially might not happen in a couple of weeks, in a couple of months. You just need to be able to quantify the impact that a new political leadership will have, and that's easily quantifiable.
Certainly. Well, Colombia is a country that everybody will be keeping their eyes on going forward. So thank you for taking the time to have a chat with me, Remi, about Colombia.
My pleasure, Scott.
And that was Remi Piet, Senior Director at America's Market Intelligence. I'm Scott Tibbles with the Investing News Network. You can find us at investingnews.com, and feel free to follow us at Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Thanks for listening.